Now, why should you learn a language? Well, if you're like me and couldn't really understand English when you were at high school, and still probably don't know what a verb or an adverb or an adjective. Actually, I do know what a verb is, it's a doing word. But an adjective, well, I probably know what it is, but I couldn't say it. If you still don't understand those things, then it's probably good to learn a language. I find a new language gives you a new way to think because it's structured differently. Maybe you put the ideas first or you put the ideas second. You put the action first or the action second. There's different ways that you kind of unlock different parts of your mind. I find it's a good way to tap into a certain culture or group of people. Now, English is probably the highest language, while, say, an African language that uses, kind of clicks and mouth noises and all that kind of stuff is a lower language. An animal language of like barks or something is lower, but if we categorize animals, a bird chirp would be higher, and potentially a dolphin kind of, I guess, any kind of water creature would be related to the lower levels, but potentially, apparently dolphins, they're pretty psychically in tune, so that would be quite higher. So different languages have different levels of kind of frequency, you can think, excuse me, depending on the culture. The darker the skin color, usually the lower, and the lighter, usually the higher. And there are higher and lower languages in each culture. For example, Africa is the lower equivalent to something like the Middle East, which is a higher equivalent of darker languages. More East, maybe Eastern European, something like German is a lower language compared to something like French. French is very fancy and very kind of more mental, I guess you could say. Well, German's a little more harsh, more physical. This doesn't make any of them better or worse, unless they are actually better or worse. Because maybe you can say things in one language that you can't say in another. Of course, the ancient culture of that language and the religions, the science, the experiences of that culture will be entrapped within the language. For example, if you look at Chinese or Japanese, they have lots of words for soul and spirit and energy and all these kinds of things. The idea of yin yang, for example. So to learn a language is really, I find it's a gateway into that culture, because if you understand, excuse me, firstly the language and then the way of life of a culture, you can blend in and you can tap into that culture and talk to those people more. I find people are very happy if you can speak their language. They find it, it's not something they experience every day, so they're very, they always smile and always glad to hear it. It's just a fun thing to talk to people. But another reason is that it teaches you how language works. Now, if you learnt mathematics and language as a child, which most of us in the West probably did, you didn't really learn it when you were intellectually mature enough to properly understand how these things work. If you went back and learned something like mathematics or English or anything you learned as a child, maybe even music. I was interested in music when I was younger. And you went back and you learned it now with the maturity level that you have, you will learn it to a further degree, a much further degree. Learning language is fascinating because it teaches you how language works, how words are formed and structured. This gives you a greater power to express your thoughts into language. Language is simply just the communication domain for, well, really whatever you want, for thoughts, for actions, for stories, whatever you really want. It's a good thing, and it also develops your mind. Now, I found when I first started learning the language, I would get very tired very quickly. Now I don't get tired. It still can be stressful. If my throat, for example, is blocked, you have to make sure that your throat is relaxed and is open. The more relaxed and open your throat is, the better it will be. And you will develop your throat as a muscle, to be able to feel it, like the mind-muscle connection as well. So focusing on the throat, for example, can be good while learning a language. It will help you. But also the mind is used within the language. You have to you develop your intelligence, which is good. So I recommend you learn a language if you're interested in it. These are some things that maybe you might be fascinated by. Anyway, that's all for this one. Of course, check the links in the description, and have a nice day.